the matter ejected from the stomach. It was of a dark color, resembling coffee grounds, sometimes mixed with blood. Great flatulency, hemorrhages from different parts of the body, tongue frequently covered over with blood, urine, very offensive. Not only were these evacuations and odors loathsome, they were considered dangerous. Well, I don't know how many of you have tried to get middle school kids to read. It is a challenge, and I have taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for a long time. And I have discovered that gross and gory and gruesome and body fluids, the more disgusting, the better. And so I'm always looking for a way to get kids to read, number one, and to introduce primary and secondary sources as a research tool. And I am going to shamelessly plug Jim Murphy, shamelessly. If you have never read any of his books, they are wonderful. He has written several books about the boys in the Civil War, Shackleton's Adventures. He writes nonfiction, and he has done a great job incorporating both primary and secondary sources in his books. Now, I love the 4th grade teacher that was talking about when you ask your kids, what's a primary source? Well, 8th graders have a little bit more knowledge about what a primary source is, but not a lot more. So I have to teach them not only what a primary source is, but how to differentiate between a primary and a secondary source, and then how those are utilized in research. So I'm a zealot now about standards-based instruction and grading. And I have chosen categories, and my categories are information literacy, invention and knowledge, critical thinking and reasoning in my social studies classroom. So, information literacy. Can you read a document? Can you determine between a primary and secondary source? Then, once we have found the difference, can you interact with those sources? So we read, we research, and then we risk. Now, 8th graders like to ask questions. They are rebellious. They want to know why. They're like that 3-year-old that asks why 1,000 times. When I took the question workshop 2 weeks ago, it's perfect. It works perfectly for middle school kids. So I constantly will show them a primary source and have them ask questions. I do that already. The process that we learned about takes me a step further. So, for instance, in this book, there is a lot of records. They're church records. It talks about who died during the yellow fever plague, how they died, how old were they, what cemetery they were buried in. So you give kids these records, and they can ask all kinds of questions. How do you die from mortification? What is mortification? Okay, it's being scared. How can you die from being afraid? Well, chances are it was a heart attack. So they hypothesize all of these things that they find in these primary source documents. So that starts us into the research phase, where they ask questions and then they hypothesize. So they come up with their answers. Then on to risk. Now, I'm a true believer in interacting. I love the primary source interaction tool that the Library of Congress has provided. However, I like my kids to be a little bit more hands-on with their interactions. I like them to buy into their learning, to engage in their learning, where they are creating facsimile primary source documents. So let's say one of their questions is, why did so many people end up being buried in the Potter's Field in Philadelphia rather than the Christ Church Cemetery? So we go through and we look at census records and the fact that these people were poor. All the rich people left Philadelphia during the yellow fever plague. They could get out of town. And we talk about The Walking Dead then too, you know, who got out of Atlanta and who didn't. And so Then kids make a hypothesis, and then I have them create a facsimile primary source document that proves their hypothesis. A journal entry, or they find church records. And although I totally use technology in my classroom all the time, my librarians back here shall tell you I'm a computer lab hog at my school. When kids are creating facsimile primary source documents, part of the thing that I really like to encourage them to do is make the document look real. So what would a journal look like if you found it in a trunk in Philadelphia and it talked about how you had to bury your relative in Potter's Field because you had no money? You had no money. So you buried your mother in the Potter's Field and you forever regretted that instance. So 8th graders love creating stuff. So they will make these journals and they will dip them in tea and they will burn the edges. And you know how we all used to do. And we've gotten away with that, or away from that somewhat with our use of technology. And they really like the hands-on activity of creating their facsimile primary source documents. So I'm out of time. And I am more than willing to share with you any of my facsimile documents I have kids create. In fact, I have a Donner Party document. You know, it's great to be Louis Keseberg, the last one found in the Donner Party by the bucket of blood. Then making your millions as a restaurant owner in a gold mining town. So any of those things that you would like to see or you'd like me to share with you, you have my email address, and I'd be more than happy to share. Thank you.